Well, welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. Happy Star Wars Day, everybody. It's May the 4th, and I thought I would round out my talking about the original prequel trilogy for Star Wars. Thought I'd get dressed up in my Sith gear here because we are talking Revenge of the Sith. And I'd actually started this 2 years ago when I talked about how I actually quite liked Jar Jar Binks and I liked The Phantom Menace, and a lot of people saying, thank goodness, because that was sort of what I was raised up on, and it's nice to hear somebody defending that. So the year after that, I followed that with, well, I'm not as big of a fan of Attack of the Clones. So I just thought, well, for the final part of these videos, why don't I talk about Revenge of the Sith? Especially since this is the 20th anniversary. It came out 20 years ago now, and it's playing in theaters. So if you get the chance, go and check it out. My overall impression for Revenge of the Sith, I remember coming out of the theater and immediately the people I was with, they were saying, so what'd you think? You're a big Star Wars guy. And I had said, Revenge of the Sith, that's more like it. Now, I don't necessarily adore Revenge of the Sith. I think it has a lot of problems, and I'm going to get into those. But I think, there it is, 20th anniversary. I think it is a nice way to have wrapped up all the loose threads that were left over from Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. I'm not going to go deep into the plot. I mean, see the movie and you'll find that Anakin has discovered that Padme is pregnant, and that means he's going to change his life, and there's a bunch of things involving Obi-Wan doing an investigation. I'm not really here so much to talk about the overall arcing story, though there were some very neat bits in Revenge of the Sith we hadn't actually seen before. For example, this is the first movie in any of the Star Wars films at that point that ever had a dream sequence. There are bits where Anakin wakes up because he sees Padme dying in childbirth, and that's really got him freaked out. And I just thought, wow, we've never seen a dream sequence before. That's pretty interesting. Also, I said the same thing, I think, in Attack of the Clones last year, how that was the first time we had seen advertising and billboards and sports events and stuff. So Revenge of the Sith kind of carries on this unusual pattern of things we'd never seen. We've seen them in a lot of other sci-fi, but never in Star Wars before. And the dream sequence suddenly struck out to me. It's like, yeah, there we go. You've never seen that before. Now, Obi-Wan and Anakin, they go to rescue Palpatine. He's been taken by Count Dooku. And here's another moment that made me appreciate Revenge of the Sith. They are squaring off against him, and Dooku kind of flings Obi-Wan off to the side, and now it's down to Anakin to finish the deed. And there is a bit, Palpatine is trapped in the chair, and there is a bit where he has Dooku down. He's got both of his lightsabers at his throat, and it's like, okay, this is the end for you, Dooku. And Palpatine says, execute him. And Anakin does, just cuts his head off, much like we had seen with Jango Fett as well in the previous movie. You'd never see that now. Disney, having taken over Star Wars, they have, not just from a point of view of a bit of violence and like graphic gore, not that you see blood or anything, but you are aware of a body without a head shuffling to the ground. So you know what happens. And I just thought to myself, not only would you not see that from a gore point of view anymore, but also Disney seems to be allergic to the idea of like killing any main characters ever, no matter who they are, good guy or bad guy. There are a lot of examples in the newer shows that they have launched where we have characters who really should die. They would have in the original bunch of films from George Lucas. They don't, ever, because they want to sell action figures of them. So I just thought that was a very interesting bit that George Lucas didn't pull any punches. He killed Dooku outright, right in front of us. Good. And as I say, there are long sequences where Obi-Wan goes to a big planet with a big pit in the center, or big city surrounding it. He's riding on a weird dragon lizard creature. He fights against Grievous. Anakin goes, and there are some really good bits. Now, Anakin has in his head a bit of jealousy. He somehow figures that Obi-Wan and Padme might be becoming more than just friends, and that's got him starting to turn to the dark side. And there is a really good couple of bits where Anakin goes. One of the things that I really loved in the movie, Anakin goes and he joins with Palpatine, not like this just yet, to a big opera in like a big coliseum, and Palpatine's sitting there. They have a moment, and it's a very quiet moment. This is something I really appreciate with Revenge of the Sith. George Lucas had the courage in his big spectacle, crazy bunch of special effects film. He had the courage to just stop and be quiet. And in the bit where he's sitting with Palpatine, Palpatine decides to tell him the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise. And Ian McDiarmid, I mean, he knows what he's doing here. He's got a great opportunity to just eat up the scene, and he does it with such panache and silvery tongue. He's fantastic in that bit, but I also just love how slow and methodical that scene is. Similarly, there is a bit where Anakin is now deciding, what am I going to do? I have Palpatine telling me one direction to save Padme, because these dream sequences have been telling me she's going to die in childbirth. I have this feeling that she and Obi-Wan are getting something together, and I don't like that. And the Jedi Order are not really delivering what I need as a Jedi follower. And so there's a great bit, and this is cinematic courage. We just see Anakin sitting alone in his quarters, and he looks out at the sun setting on Coruscant. And we also cut to Padme. She's also just looking out at the traffic and the setting sun. And it's one of those few moments that really made me think, yes, here is cinema being allowed to just breathe and for us to develop an appreciation of what's going on for the characters. It's this slow change that has to happen for Anakin, and that moment is just given its chance to breathe. Now, I have a few complaints. Anakin does kind of turn to the dark side really quick, which is unfortunate. All of the bits are there, but it's just that little bit. They've hit the accelerator a little bit on how Anakin is suddenly now going to become a Sith Lord, and I wasn't wild about that, but you got to do what you got to do. I mean, there is a theme that you're going to find toward my conclusion about this movie, that George Lucas had kind of painted himself into a corner with a lot of the plot, and he has this one to get everything squared away before A New Hope, and we follow Luke and Leia and Han. So I think, although the change for Anakin is a bit quick, it was understandably, it had to happen a certain way, and I didn't mind it too much. It was something I could allow. It was something I could forgive. Then Palpatine decides to engage Order 66 and all of the troopers that have been helping our Jedi and various other members of the government of the Old Republic. They switch and they all start killing the Jedi. And that is a really moving scene, even by today's standards. Like, it really had an impact on me. It was a very powerful moment, and I loved it. And it is something that gives me a good level of appreciation. When I say Revenge of the Sith is more like it, that's what I was talking about. There are bits where we have a real turn. Now, I remember telling a coworker of mine, she was saying, would my kids like it? And I said, well, they might be confused, because up to now, the clone troopers have been our friends, and then they become our enemies. And that's kind of hard for, I think, kids to understand. So maybe a very pivotal moment, and this is another, you wouldn't see that today from Disney. Anakin goes to the Jedi Temple, and there are some younglings, kids in training, going, "What's going on, Master Skywalker? We don't know." And all you see is him ignite his lightsaber. And we know that from a line of dialogue from Obi-Wan, he killed those children. That's tough. That's a difficult thing to explain and forgive, and to not draw negativity from. You know what I mean? Like, I can't really not defend, what's the right word? My friend Andrew, who I've talked about many times, playing Star Frontiers, he and I were talking about Revenge of the Sith not too long ago, and he said, that scene means that Anakin is completely without remorse and without any sympathy. It makes him the vile, evil villain. That doesn't make any sense, especially when you consider at the end of Return of the Jedi, we see young Anakin, the Hayden Christensen version, standing with Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, and they're all smiling. Oh, it's all over now. Vader is defeated, and the Empire has been destroyed, and Luke will now lead the Jedi Order, etc., etc. And my friend Andrew was just like, no, that doesn't make any sense. How can you be buddies with somebody who killed all those children? That's awful. That's a terrible direction to have taken the character. And I was like, yeah, that's a valid criticism. I think what I would say as my personal take on that is, look, again, George Lucas kind of painted himself into a corner here. Vader has to show up at the end of this movie, and he has to be evil. There has to be enough. We've kind of been very sympathetic toward Anakin's plight in the first two movies, like you kind of get where he's coming from, etc. But now it's like, no. Now he's got to take that full leap into being a fully evil character. Darth Vader must take root. The scene with the kids, as distasteful as it is, I think is necessary to show our audience that, like, yeah, now Anakin is gone. He cannot be returned to his original self. He even pushes Padme down using the Force, leading him and Obi-Wan to have their big final fight. Great fight sequence that takes place over the lava planet of Mustafar. Really, really gets us to where those two characters are eventually. We know that those two are going to fight, and they do so gloriously in this sequence. And I felt like, yes, you're getting us there. It makes sense for the plot. We had to have the kids die. Now, my sister also had a very interesting take on these various points, and I feel I want to give them light as well. She said, look, at the end of Return of the Jedi, if that's the bit that has some people uncertain, when you see Alec Guinness Obi-Wan looking over at Hayden Christensen Anakin and smiling, you got to remember he, as Vader at the end of Jedi, has redeemed himself. He saved his son. He threw Palpatine down the well. This is the coming over, the turnaround for Anakin as a character. And that's why Obi-Wan is looking at him. And they were long-term friends. Remember, they spanned from when Anakin was the little 9-year-old we saw in Phantom Menace. Those two had a bond for a long time. Now that he has now that he has saved his son and destroyed the Emperor and done away with all of the things that made him Darth Vader, there is a happy resonance with Obi-Wan Kenobi and with Yoda in that end scene. I can kind of see Andrew's point, but for me, it was, we have to have an evil villain at the end of Revenge of the Sith. We have to have Vader show up, like in the guise, in the body of Anakin Skywalker. There has to be Darth Vader. It can't be just circumstantial, whatever. And again, you'd never get these moments in Disney now. You would never have any of that bit where kids got implied through the plot and the script that children were killed. You wouldn't get that today. And I'm appreciative that George Lucas actually had the guts to show that in this film. My sister also had a really good point. The Jedi are very spiritual, monk-like warriors. So the idea that Obi-Wan would hold a grudge against Anakin all those years, in the ghostly form, that's not very Jedi-like. That's not what those guys are about. And I got that. For him, the bit with Anakin showing up at the end of Return of the Jedi showed that he had atoned for his sins. He has elevated himself out of the way that the Sith took over him. The revenge of the Sith no longer has a hold on Anakin. In a way, not only Luke, but Anakin himself is a return of the Jedi. it does bring the two ends of the trilogies, both the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, into this little alignment of plot. I think it was really, really good. Now, there are still some niggling problems that a lot of people can point out, and they are right. In Return of the Jedi, Luke is talking with Leia about, do you remember your mother, your real mother? And she's like, oh, yeah, I remember her well. And it's like, well, in this movie, they're infants. They are newly born, and then Padme dies. So how did you know her? Again, George Lucas had written himself into a corner. Like, I remember my biggest beef with Phantom Menace was when we see Obi-Wan first meeting Anakin, and he's a little kid. The line in the original trilogy, the line in the first Star Wars film is, when I met him, your father was already a great pilot. And it's like, as a 9-year-old, I mean, yes, he does fly very well, but that felt like a stretch. And that was the beginning of me going, okay, George Lucas is well known to have, like, kind of spitballed the original trilogy together at times. For example, if you ever can find a copy of The Secret History of Star Wars, Anakin, Luke's dad, and Darth Vader were separate people originally in the idea of the books, or in the idea of the films. George Lucas very clearly had a plot in mind between Luke's dad and Darth Vader. But in making the film, and it nearly killed him, George Lucas was just like, okay, I need to pare this thing down. I'm not going to do this 12-episode saga that I originally envisioned. Let's pare it down. Let's do like 3 movies. And for both a bit of efficiency of the plot and also to make it kind of interesting, Vader was Luke's dad. Yeah. Okay, but that means Vader was a great pilot when Obi-Wan first met him, and we see that in Phantom Menace, and he's not. Or, it's... the kid can fly, but pilot indicated to me, anyway, that's like a career? How was that kid a career pilot? We're not talking about Phantom Menace. We're talking about Revenge of the Sith. The fact that Padme didn't really have a connection with Leia, and everybody points that out in their criticism, among other things, for Revenge of the Sith, I'm like, yeah, that's almost impossible to explain and forgive. All I can say is George had, he had set all of these things in motion, and he had a lot of strings he had to tie up. And he did a decent job of it, I think. There are problems with Revenge of the Sith, but I think overall, considering the home plate that he had to slide into to finish this ball game, I think a couple of scrapes and scratches aside, he did it. He delivered on what Revenge of the Sith was supposed to tie up with the original prequel trilogy. I think he did okay. Now, I've never seen Revenge of the Sith in the chronological sense. I have watched all of the movies lots of times, but I know of people who have actually watched Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, then A New Hope. And I don't know that... does that work? Does it flow well for anybody who's tried that? Or is it janky as heck? Because to me, knowing these bits and pieces that were wrong, these scratches as sliding into home base, as it were, I don't know that Revenge of the Sith can lead into A New Hope very well. Does it? Have you tried it? Let me know, because I'm very interested. I'm going to leave it there. That is my rounding up of the original prequel trilogy for Star Wars Day, May the 4th. I hope you all have a good celebration, if you do. Question to the audience. Should I do more of these in future May the 4ths? Do you want me to talk about the new trilogy with Rey and Finn and Kylo Ren? Or are we kind of done? I've got other Star Wars stuff I could talk about for May the 4th. Let me know. I'm interested what your opinion is. I'm going to leave it there, so until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.